The Mustang has had an absolutely amazing run during its 55-plus year history. It's truly a testament to Ford Motor Company and the Mustang community that the car has been that popular for that long. And while there are a ton of great stories involving the Ford Mustang, there's a bunch of unflattering ones as well. So today we're actually going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about the top 10 Mustang myths, misconceptions, and fallacies. So before we get to the top 10 list, we're going to start off with an honorable mention. No, we are not getting out of the Mustang market. We've been in this market for over 35 years and we are not going anywhere. It was an April Fool's video. Obviously we sold it a little bit too well, but did you really think I was going to put 35s and a lift kit on my 93 Cobra? Now, this has been a misconception for years because Mustangs, a lot of owners use them for straight line drag racing. But a Mustang set up properly is an amazing handling car, and the modern Mustangs, even in factory trim, really handle well. I mean, these cars have won Trans Am races, they've won ultimate street car shootouts, autocrosses, all kinds of different things. We've had a few cars in our studio here that handle amazing. Again, with the right choice of parts, any Mustang, even a classic Mustang, can handle with the best of them. A lot of people feel for years, the Mustang used to be a much cheaper car. I mean, back in the Fox body days and even in the classic days, they were kind of entry-level, very affordable cars, and a lot of times they were forced down the assembly line and build quality was suspect. Well, that's not the case anymore. I mean, even I would say up to the S197, you really saw a lot of improvements. And when the S550 came out, it was a game changer for Ford. I mean, we're not talking six-figure car build quality here, but for the price of a new Mustang, the interior appointments, the quality, and the overall build is far better than it's ever been in the past. So there were quite a few fast Mustangs back in the day, and a lot of people still have in their head the muscle car era were the fastest cars ever. And while there are lots of amazing muscle cars back then, overall they weren't as fast as the modern cars, basically because of technology. But back in the day, a lot of people felt the Boss 429 was probably the fastest Mustang ever made, or maybe it was the Boss 351, but actually it was none of the above. The fastest Mustang had the same letters as our company, and that was the CJ in 68.5. Mid-68, Ford decided to make the Mustang a true muscle car and dropped the 428 Cobra Jet engine into your choice of a 1968 GT Fastback, GT Coupe, or even a GT convertible. Now, these cars were underrated at 335 horsepower to keep the insurance adjusters happy, but realistically made well over 400, and even back then, on the crappy tires they raced on, mid-13s at 105 to 106 were perfectly normal for the street-going cars, with the drag Cobra Jets running mid-11s at over 120 miles an hour. Now, I probably got a lot of slack for this one, but I've been around since these cars were brand new. And while modified Fox body Mustangs are extremely fast cars, stock, they really weren't. Back in the day when these cars were new, you had a couple guys in Jersey, New York that had stripped NLXs that were sneaking into the 13s bone stock. Most of them were running 14s, and if you had an AOD, you were at a 15-second car if you were lucky. I mean, you gotta remember, most of these had 225 horsepower. Even the 93 Cobra, which was the fastest of the day, only had 245 horsepower. Nowadays, minivans make that kind of horsepower. Hybrids have more horsepower than that. Compared to modern cars, stock Fox bodies were not fast cars whatsoever. But again, we've seen so many modified ones over the years that a lot of people feel that all Fox bodies were fast, and back in the day, it might have been quick for what it was, but it was not a fast car. Now, this one is definitely blowing up now that everybody has a cell phone in their hand and there's so much thing on Instagram, YouTube, whatever. But trust me, there are plenty of Mustang owners that can drive. Go to an NMRA event, go to Optimus Street Car, go to a drift event, and watch what these guys can really do with their cars. Unfortunately, a few people leaving car shows trying to show off and made the rest of us look bad. But again, there are plenty of good drivers. And if you're leaving a car show and you feel the need to do a burnout to impress all these people that are really hoping you're just going to crash so they get some Instagram views, at least make sure the car is straight before you drop the clutch. Everybody's turning when your traction lock is disengaged, and when you floor it, it's going to lock and send you in the direction you're not planning on going. Now, a lot of drivers can save it, but obviously a lot can't. So please, if you're leaving a show and feel the need to do this, make sure the car is straight, and if it gets loose, lift. We see this on the forums all the time, we see it in the message groups, and we even see it on the YouTube comments. Every time we do a video on an EcoBoost or a V6 Mustang, we get the real Mustangs have V8s. Well, in the entire history of the Mustang, there's always been other engine options. Now, back in the day, your base model 6-cylinder was most likely for fuel economy or to keep the cost down as opposed to performance, but that has actually changed over the years. Now, once you hit specifically the S550, but even the later S197s, the 6-cylinder Mustang was a decent performance car. You're talking over 300 horsepower factory for a V6. A couple years earlier, that's what the Cobra had, and that was in a V6 Mustang. EcoBoost is the same way. It's like, yeah, in stock form, it's a quick little car. It has more horsepower than the Cobra did as well. And again, they're not as fast as the GT or the GT350, but modified V6s and modified EcoBoosts have been in the 9-second range and have made well over 500 to 600 horsepower, which means it's a venerable platform. A lot of us, myself included, I still prefer the sound of a V8, but you can't discount how quick a V6 Mustang or an inline-4 turbo Mustang can actually be. If you're ever shopping for a Mustang, this is one you see all the time. You'll have somebody advertising their car, any classic Mustang, as a frame-off restoration. Well, frame-off isn't really an option with the Mustang. What a frame-off restoration means is that it's a solid frame car and the body can be removed from the frame for restoration. While Mustang is a subframe, it's a unibody car. So basically it has a front subframe, a rear subframe that's held together by floor pans and rockers. So can you actually remove the body and the frame? You absolutely can, but you're not going to simply unbolt the body and remove it from the frame, which is truly what a frame-off restoration means. So ever since there's been a manual transmission option in the Mustang, stick shift owners are complaining about the factory quality. Whether it was the early 4-speeds, the T5, MT82, 3650, T45, name any of those transmissions and Mustang owners are complaining about how weak they are. Well, again, most of the people who are damaging these are abusing them and using them beyond the horsepower they're rated at. There's been an MT82 in the 8s. There's been a T5 in the 8s in the quarter mile. There's thousands and thousands of people that have never damaged their transmission. Now, sure, there are some issues with these. I'm not going to say they're perfect by any means, but they're definitely not the junk that everybody wants you to believe they are. Get some proper hardware with it, such as a good quality shifter, a good clutch. The factory trans is not a terrible piece. So the Mustang 2 gets a lot of hate from a lot of the Mustang community, and it really isn't deserved. Now, you gotta remember, back in the day in 1973, the Mustang was a massive car. It was absolutely huge, and we had the gas crisis going on. It was the wrong car for the time. So there came the Mustang 2. It was smaller, people called it Pinto-like, but it was the right car at the time. It was a huge sales hit for Ford. They sold way more Mustang 2s than they did the 71 through 73 Mustang. So again, if it wasn't for that Mustang 2, we probably wouldn't have today's Mustangs because Ford Mustang may have gone away altogether. So even if you're not a fan of the Mustang 2, next time you see one at a car show, I'm going to show it a little bit of respect because if it wasn't for that car, you may not be driving your modern Mustang. Now, this one's sure to stir up some controversy, and this is something people have argued about as long as I can remember and probably will argue about in the future. Was the Mustang named after the fighter jet? Well, it wasn't and it was. So it's kind of a semi-truth. It's not a complete myth, but there's not, in the end, it wasn't what the name was actually designed for. So one of the Mustang designers was a big fan of the P51, and in his mind, that was one of the things they were basing the Mustang off of. When the discussion happened with Ford about it being named after the fighter jet, Ford did not want that association. At the time, Ford was a big fan of naming their cars after animals. You had the Falcon ahead of it. So the Mustang was actually originally going to be called the Cougar, and there are actually even some photos of Mustang bodies with Cougar emblems in the grille. Now, at the end, it was decided to go with the name Mustang for a bunch of different reasons. The Mustang horse name was wild, it was free, it was American. Plus, Iacocca was a fan of the Mustangs college football team. So again, there was a lot of people at Ford who loved that Mustang name. So in the end, the Mustang was really named after the horse and not after the fighter jet, but the fighter jet definitely had a part in the Mustang naming history. We had a good time working with several members of the Mustang community to come up with that top 10 list, and I'm sure there's a lot more other ones, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to question some of them, but again, it was all in good fun. And if there's any that we missed, let us know in the comments below. Maybe at some point in time, we'll do a part 2.